There's none. 8, notices of motion, there is none. And then we're now bringing the local board input to be in front of the disposals recommendation report. We're going to have Julia first, and I just want to signal there's no one from the Waitakere Rangers board here, is there? No. Okay. Julia.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Janet.
Done my best to throw water all over the table. I was just trying to fix that a little bit, but all that excitement. That's Waitakere. Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for giving the Hibiscus and Bays Local Board the opportunity to speak to this item. I'd just like to introduce 2 of my local board members, our Deputy Chair, Janet Fitzgerald, and Christina Bettany, who is a fellow Bays subdivision member like myself. Mr. Chairman, in speaking to this item, we have a very clear view when it comes to 19 Anzac Road, Browns Bay. And we'd like to talk to you today very briefly, we hope, after your last item, about what we see as poor process and some incorrect information. We would like to talk to you about how we understand and empathise with Council in the disposal of assets and the need for funding. And we would like to then finally talk about 19 Anzac Road and why we believe this is an extremely strategic asset for our area. Firstly, in talking about poor process, we have actually had very little help and support from the requiring authority, Auckland Transport, in this matter. We note that they say in the report that this particular property wasn't subject to designation. In a way they are correct, because in the maps of the district plan, the North Shore District Plan, it shows that the property 21 Anzac being designated and 19 not being. It was an error. It was an error, and having been part of that legacy council, I will take some of the blame for that. But here is a strategic piece of property that was purchased by the East Coast Bays Borough Council. It was purchased after it had been designated in their plan as a car park. It's been used since then, since its purchase, over 40 years ago, as a car park, and in disposing of it, we were not actually even advised of the designation process when it was lifted, the confusion about 19 versus 21 by the requiring authority, and we also, no discussion was entered into before part of this site was gazetted off and it went to the gazetting process. We believe that the local board should have been consulted on that matter. The history is long, and I'll touch on that a little bit further when I talk about its need and requirement as a strategic asset. We understand, as a local board, council's need to dispose of certain assets. We know that council is getting to its indebtedness levels. You would have seen that the local board in the past supported a couple of disposals, including, in this particular item here, the over 6 hectare site in East Coast Road, Redvale, and in the past we supported the sale of 20 Link Crescent, which was on the disposal list of Rodney District Council, but on the proviso that the 60 new homes that were built on that 2 hectare site had to adhere to certain design standards. And if you go up to Link Crescent, it's like the tale of two cities. You look over the way at the first site that Panuku disposed of at 17 Link Crescent, which was rather Stalinistic in its design and has very little amenity compared to 20 Link Crescent, which Panuku have sold off now but is being developed. So we're not adverse to the idea, But when we come to why we believe that 19 Anzac Road should not be sold off, we'd like to talk to you a little about its strategic value. Right back 40 years ago, the council of the day saw the need for more car parking in Browns Bay. And it really amazes us that Auckland Transport believe it's fit for disposal in 2017, a time when the unitary plan has actually determined that most of the tract of land in Browns Bay will be intensively developed. And it's already happened. And as we know, some of those unitary plan provisions don't require any car parking, particularly if you're like Browns Bay, which is considered to be on a transport hub. So this car parking, these 42 car parks, are very, very well used. In fact, we have the strong support of the Browns Bay Business Association, who are very concerned about the loss of these car parking. We know that we've had a number of approaches from residents and businesses concerned too. Many of them had to pay cash in lieu payments in the past for their own car parking shortfalls, and this and two other properties actually provided the car parking that was used for cash in lieu payments. It's a very grey area. I know you've probably had advice on a number of such grey areas, but we believe that this land was taken and used for this purpose. So the businesses of Browns Bay are quite concerned about the potential loss of this car parking. I note when I did a little bit of a study about the number of designations that have been removed for car parking between the district plans and the unitary plan, that this could be an issue coming to your area quite soon thereafter. It seems that they're dealing at the moment with disposal of car parks in the north. I think you've had recent items, haven't you, from Warkworth to Takapuna, and suggests they're probably coming down and then across and so forth. There are certain assets in our Hibiscus and Bays board's viewpoint are too strategic to be sold off. That's why they were acquired in the first place. And we would like your support in ensuring that this particular property is not disposed of, that it continue to be used as a car park. I know there's some small reference there in the fact that maybe as White Night we might have foodstuffs come to the rescue. That discussion was had after there was some suggestion of this, and I spoke to Mr. Christini, the owner-operator of New World, but that's not exactly what they're seeking. They have their own car parking space, and again, there is no certainty like having a designation in place, which unfortunately this property hasn't. And we would like to ensure that this continue to be used as car parking. I know Chris Bettany here to my left had her car recently towed away from one of the supermarket car parks, so it's not exactly public car parking available for use. So I'd just like to plead with you on behalf of the Hibiscus and Hibiscus and Bays local board. Normally other people get it all mixed up, and I apologise for that, because we believe that this asset needs to be retained. We believe that it's not exactly going to be a smooth process disposal, because in reading through the property file, which I did a couple of months ago, recognise the fact that it was brought with the designation in place, and offering it back to the family could come with this property having very little value, particularly if they were to argue, because they had tried to uplift the designation before they sold it to the East Coast Bays Borough Council, that they would be seeking it at a very low price. So these are one of the assets or jewels in our area that we would like to see retained.
Thank you, Julia.
Oh, there's just one other aspect, and thank goodness I have my members here. One thing that was of great importance to us was that Auckland Transport actually had to prove that this land had no strategic value as a car park. We called upon a parking survey to be prepared. That car parking survey to date has not been completed, and it has not been presented to us. So at the very least, we believe that nothing should happen until that survey comes forward and we have the opportunity to discuss it.
Thank you, Julia. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And my question goes, in fact, to that last point. So I'm looking at the Hibiscus and Bays resolution from some time earlier in the year. And point 3 is there that the results of the proposed Auckland Transport parking survey for Browns Bay have not been provided and considered. So my simple question to you is, and it probably could go to you too, Mr Chair, is what we're doing considering sale of a car park when a parking survey that has been conducted by Auckland Transport, the findings haven't been made public or put to the local board. I just wonder how you can proceed with a sale on that basis. Have you any comment on that?
Well, we would agree with you and concur with you there. We just can't understand how you would be considering disposal today without that study which has been started not being completed and considered.
So I guess, Mr Chair, that's a question to you as head of this committee.
It'll be a question you can direct to Letitia when we come back, because obviously Auckland Transport have come back and said to dispose of the property, so Letitia can answer probably a bit more specifically about the survey. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It was a question to Julia. I've been going through the designation schedule in the unitary plan, and it's not in there. Do you know if this matter came up for debate during the designation hearing for the IHP? It wasn't.
No, we were not alerted to it at all, and we were not aware. I did have a look over the public record and couldn't find any reference to it being discussed. As a couple of the councillors who were previously chairs could agree that I was at virtually all of the unitary plan workshop meetings, and this particular property did not come up. And we're quite surprised that when Auckland Transport went to the process of taking part of the lot for an access way,
Yeah.
and gazetting that, again, our local board had actually no discussion with them. They didn't alert us to it then either.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Walker, Wayne Walker.
Sure. Just picking up on the issue around parking, and obviously the absence of a report on that. Just in terms of the context, would it be fair to say that the unitary plan is going to have a significant impact on the number of people in the catchment of Browns Bay? And further to that, if we're talking about the impact of that increasing intensity in the catchment, and I'm talking about in particular residential activity apartments, is it not going to be the case that there's going to be a much greater need for parking associated with both the residential activity, which is in the immediate vicinity, and also parking for retail associated with the much bigger number of people living in the area? And what might the impact of that be?
Well, we're not exactly sure of the impact, but we know the uptake in Browns Bay has been far higher than other brownfield areas. We've already seen 3 developments occur there. We know of 4 others where consent's either been gained or is in the pipeline. So that's quite considerable development, and many of those residential properties that are being created do not require a car parking component. So we are concerned about that. We know that the retail still do, and we notice that while the North Shore City Council had stopped their cash in lieu payment scheme towards the end of North Shore City, the actual unitary plan still allows for that to happen. So council do have the opportunity to actually earn income on the site by using it for further cash in lieu payments.
And just a related question, is the parking area used for other activities other than just parking? And could you expand on that?
It is used under arrangement that occurred during North Shore City Days for a community, how would you describe it? It's a market day that occurs there where the actual recipient of the large part of the funding is the Coast Guard. In fact, they just recently built a boat with the funding that was provided from the income from the markets.
Just on that, can you give us some idea of the scale of that market, the placemaking, the community aspects of it?
Well, it has a huge community placemaking aspect because community groups are able to have a stall for free. It is very much, when you compare it to some of the commercial markets around, quite different in character and nature.
And just in terms of alternative sites for parking and also the community aspect, is there anywhere else that it could go?
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever your viewpoint is, the demand for land in Browns Bay is primarily for producing intensive residential development. And so we believe that, and I had to restrain one of our former mayors from coming along this morning or this afternoon, because they were really concerned at the fact that if it was a strategic asset then, it's an even more strategic asset having this car park now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Member.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Ngā mihi kia koutou e tēnei wā. So, Council's been very strong on relationships with Māori and local boards. They've been very strong about that too. So in the feedback related to this property, I note that there's an iwi saying it has spiritual and cultural significance to them, this site. And I guess my question really is, and what have you undertaken as the local board to understand that positioning, and how have you advocated for that and what you're thinking today?
In looking at that, and I looked through, we've got, I think, is it 15 iwi who believe that the land is very culturally significant. The land in Hibiscus and Bays is very culturally significant. There were mixed views there. Some were not as keen to pursue that association. We have regular meetings with iwi. We actually haven't had this particular property mentioned in those discussions. Perhaps, although they would have been aware, wouldn't they, of their disposal because they were asked for comment. But we haven't had this issue raised with us. We've actually been looking at the disposal of this property more in terms of the strategic nature of the site for car parking within Browns Bay, rather than something that was to be disposed of.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chairman. But there is one iwi that has clearly identified it in this report that's in front of us today, under iwi feedback 9KL. And again, so they have raised it, but not with you.
No, not with us.
Have you raised
recently.
it with them?
No, we haven't, because in terms of just going back to the particular iwi group that had raised it.
Yeah, Ngāti Maru have. In the report, it's on our report at page
Yeah.
30. So again, I don't know what the detail is relevant, but I'm trying to figure out how you're advocating for their positioning today and taking that into account when you say retain it for a car park. And then I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, if that's the case, how might you be taking into account that spiritual and cultural connection that they have with that site when you want to retain it as a car park? So I'm just, advancing the relationship thing that should be here between Auckland Council and Mana Whenua, and it's been strongly expressed that it should also be with local boards, and I agree with that. But what I'm not hearing is it being actually actioned. And so I didn't hear you say anything about them. I didn't say, well, if we kept it at a car site, we could recognise that sort of stuff. And I'm surprised that the report says it, but you don't know it.
Oh, I've only been made aware of it via the report. So it's, you know, we listen to Māori viewpoint, and unfortunately they're not here to express that view. I don't know, and I would not like to speak on their behalf because I think that that would be culturally inappropriate. But I wonder if they were made aware of the fact that this matter was being discussed today. I think that's more an issue of who was invited to the meeting rather than the fact that we should be here representing their view.
Okay. I think what happens is the general description's been over the long period of time now, before with, I think it was ACPL, and now Panuku, is that they have a whole protocol of engagement, ask a bunch of questions, send it out, and feedback's provided. And I guess I'm trying to advance it, not just particularly in your case, but generally, if we are raising these things, and it says in here, expressed a strong desire to explore the purchase of it if it became available, and probably to reflect their cultural and spiritual connection to the land, rather than a car park. And I guess it's again for all local boards, not just yourselves.
I understand.
How are you going about advocating for their positioning as well as part of your community, and as part of, you know, wanting to have their selves recognised as well? So it's specific to yourself on this subject, but as definitely a general question I have for all local boards. And what process are they taking to engage with Māori in their local board area to support what they want as well? Because I think it's all relevant.
I think engagement is a two-way process to begin with. And this, if you look at the document, has been a discussion point for some considerable point of time. And it's only in this last iteration that we have had a Māori impact statement as part of that report. So again, I think that as well as the Hibiscus and Bays local board, perhaps there should have been the opportunity for them to have come and to have aired their particular connection with this land.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, maybe I should ask the officers what process they undertook to advise everybody's interest.
Okay, Councillor Filipano.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, ladies. Look, I just wanted the question I want to ask is in regards to the statement of intent in regard about the properties that Panuku identify as selling. I'll be interested in, I don't know what's going to happen around this table, but I'll be interested to find out, depending on the result, whether what your thoughts would be around charging for the car parking and or charging for the markets to be there, because depending on what happens again around this table, if the council laws and the Independent Māori Statutory Board or the members of this committee choose to hold on to the property, which is against our statement of intent, it'll be interesting for us to try and get at least something back. So I'm sort of just asking what your thoughts would be.
Well, I think that firstly, and I obviously didn't make the point well enough, that this has been created, this situation, by an oversight in transcribing the number of a property. So this could easily be happening in your area.
Totally agree.
And I'd just like to ask all councillors outside the CBD area and environs like Newmarket, how they would, or Takapuna for that matter, how they would feel about charged parking in their area. It's not something that has happened in Browns Bay. We've had a private landowner who has done this now with their land in Mairangi Bay. People are voting with their feet and they are not using that car parking and not coming to the same degree to Mairangi Bay. So I think that we have a responsibility to local shopping centres, and I just ask councillors, whatever you do would have to be done uniformly across the whole region, and just singling out Browns Bay for a paid car parking regime.
I'm talking about the property that has been identified in this report for selling off. That's the only property I'm looking at, because I'm assuming that you're asking that if it doesn't get sold or there's a vote here, that it's for free. It'll go to the local board. I'm just saying, look, there has to be some option. That's the only property I'm looking at, is the one that you're talking about now.
Well, again, and with respect, Councillor Filipana, I believe that you can't take off one property. You have to talk about the implications for both that property within the whole shopping centre and within similar shopping centres right across the region.
Thank you, Julia. Julia, just one last question. Does the Countdown use that car park, quite a bit of that car park?
No, the nearest supermarket has its full car parking provision, and that is New World, and Countdown have their own car parking, but both would tell you, I'm sure Dave Chambers from Countdown and also Mr Christini on behalf of his investment there at New World would say they also have a lot of shoppers shopping in their car parks, and when they actually have the tow-away regime, many a car goes. So
So it cuts both ways, yep.
cuts.
Okay. Thank you, Julia, Janet and Christina.
I had a question
Appreciate.
as well.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Simpson, you were there, you got moved and
That's all right.
bump you
I'll have
back.
to put my hand up larger. Thank you, Julia. Look, I'm always interested in hearing local board views, because obviously we don't know everything about everything in all parts of Auckland. So I was concerned about the parking survey, and I think that's a question we'll ask Panuki when they come up. But then I had a look at page 32 in our report, because my next question was, well, where's the nearest car park, right? So I had a look at the pictures that have been supplied to us, and the top picture on page 32, have you got the report there?
No, we don't.
Oh, sorry. Well, it's got a car park right almost one section over. So for my colleagues, I'm on page 32, top picture, right? So I want to know what that car park is used for, and the one slightly to the right of the piece of land, because it looks to me as if there are two car parks in quite close proximity, if not three.
Right, well, a lot of the car park immediately to the left
Yeah.
is used by and owned by the next two car parking spaces are used by and part of, I should say, the New World site.
Right.
So, and then there is the private car parking shown there to the right of the next car park.
Right. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. The second question I have is I have heard via the grapevine, which can be quite reliable at times and therefore sometimes not, that that New World might be interested in purchasing the property. And I suppose my question is, if it was purchased as a car park, you've got $1 million plus for it, you still get the car park, we can get the money, and wouldn't everybody be happy?
It sounds so simple.
Well, it does, I know.
Yes, and you've always got to be suspicious when it sounds as simple as that. The approach that Mr Christini made was a couple of years ago. So he is meeting his car parking component
Currently he meets, yeah,
and more.
right.
The problem is that, just as Christina found out, that if the car park is in the ownership of Foodstuffs or Mr Christini personally, she can be towed away, she can be clamped if she is not a shopper of that store. This car parking has been paid off over the years for the shortfall of car parking in businesses and not people who are necessarily shoppers of New World. So it's really a difficult situation that we find ourselves in. So we don't know, A, about what Mr Christini's current aspirations are. We don't know also about whether council would redesignate this land as a car park so that it could sell it to Mr Christini to have the certainty that it will still be used in perpetuity as a car park.
Okay. And may I ask another question? So the parking in Browns Bay, do you pay for parking? In Remuera, for example, we have paid parking. Sometimes, so do you have pay and display? Is there paid parking, or is it just time?
We have it just basically timed car parking. Most of the car parking have time restriction on it. We have not paid for car parking in Browns Bay, just as most of the suburban town centres across the Auckland region do not pay for car parking.
Right. And just my final question, Mr Chair, if I may, the picture on page 32, which is all I have to refer to, has a house between the section of land that we're being discussed and the car park on the left. Can you confirm that that is still a house, or is that car parking now too?
That is the property next door, which I identified that site. Those two properties have now been consolidated
That's the two, right.
into the New World site.
Okay, right.
So that's all part of the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I will move receiving the presentation, seconded by Councillor Walker. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you.